how much we have enjoyed this men's grief series.
Oh my
And
gosh.
we had Bart Stevens.
Yep.
He talked about the loss of his wife.
Mm-hmm.
We had Chad Villaborgi, who talked about the death of his 13-year-old son through suicide. And we had Marcelo Camacho, who talked about the death of his only child through texting and driving. And I think we really, really established the difference between men's grief and women's grief.
And the fact that they have a hard time relating their grief to anybody.
Yeah.
And because they think they have to be so strong.
And take care of everybody else.
Right.
So we have an extremely special guest tonight, someone who is used to doing all the questioning and not giving any of the answers. And we promise that we are not going to let this man turn it around on us tonight. We are going to make him answer questions. And we have the wonderful, glamorous, famous, beautiful man of Phoenix, Mr. Patrick McMahon.
And inexpensive.
Yes, and he's a cheap
When you get to the bottom of the guest
what I'm going to have to put up when I get home. My gosh.
And you know, we asked Pat to come here because he's lost colleagues and coworkers, and we wanted to talk to a man about that. We don't want to just talk to him about Jack and Adeline, his mother and his father, who were vaudevillians, by the way, as he was raised in vaudeville. His father was a boxer. His mother was a character. And we don't want
That's an understatement when it comes to Adelaide.
And we don't want to talk to him about that because we do a little bit, but honestly, we all lose our parents, right?
Right.
It's a little bit different for an only child, though, and Pat was an only child. So I think that's a little bit different when you're an only child and you lose your parents.
Right.
But we want to talk to him a little bit about the loss of some coworkers that are very familiar to those of us here in Phoenix, since many people who were raised here were raised with the Wallace and Ladmo show.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of them, because two different things. And probably the first one we'll talk about is Mike Condello, who was like a little brother to him.
To Pat.
To Pat.
And who was Mike? You know, I know who Wallace and Ladmo, and just so that everybody knows that Wallace and Ladmo started their show before Pat joined them, and I think
he started in 1954. Pat came in 1960, and
right.
at about the same time in 1960, a young kid by the name of Mike Condello, who was about 14 years old at the time, was this brilliant guitarist and music person who could just put together stuff, and so he became kind of a son to Wallace, a brother to Ladmo and Pat, and he became the music director. So during the 60s, you heard all of the music of Mike Condello, and even with Hubcap and the Wheels, Mike Condello was the music director and writer and putting things together.
Pat, tell us about Hubcap and the Wheels. What is Hubcap and the Wheels?
This is only an hour show.
I know.
Okay, well, for those of you who arrived in Phoenix after the 60s, you may have heard some reference to this crazy rock and roll concept that this kids show had. Now, Wallace and Ladmo was kind of like Monty Python, Saturday Night Live, and not so much like Bozo. And so we were always looking for satirical pieces that we could do out of contemporary society, out of the news. And as soon as the Beatles and the Stones and the Beach Boys started appearing on the front page of the paper, my partner Wallace said, wait a minute, there's something here. We really ought to have our own overnight teenage sensation. And we said, terrific. When should we start that? He said, tomorrow, because it should be an overnight teenage sensation. And authenticity was everything. But so we created this character. Black bouffant hair, mink eyelashes, big eyebrows.
You can actually just go ahead and look up Hubcap and the Wheels, and you can see what it's like
on YouTube.
On YouTube,
right?
But anyhow, so Mike Condello was that person.
He was the lead guitarist for the house band on the Wallace Show, and therefore, when it came to creating a brand new character with his own band, well, we couldn't afford to have another band come in, and so all we did was put hats and sunglasses on the band we had, and they became the Wheels.
So he was part of the Hubcap and the Wheels, he was part of that band.
Well, Mike was the lead guitarist. Mike was as close to a musical genius as I ever had the privilege of working with. He was the guy who truly appreciated the complexities of what the Beatles were doing in the '60s, and he would pick up a sitar, this East Indian instrument that was so difficult to play, and all of a sudden he's playing
before
it
George Harrison did it.
Yes,
before
right,
George
as a
Harrison
result of
did
Ravi
it.
Shankar,
Yeah.
right? But so Mike was one of those guys you could always depend on, and so we.
And he was wonderful and irreverent, and
he was. You had to be irreverent to be a part of the Wall.
Right, exactly.
Well, he had a great sense of humor. He was kind of an Italian leprechaun. Had this wonderful sense of humor. Didn't take life too seriously, but he took music very seriously. And so we started the group on the show, and it began to grow and grow and grow beyond anything we expected. And we wound up on Capitol Records and a lot of network television shows.
You were on the Steve Allen Show,
and Joey Bishop,
and you were hubcap. You wore the bouffant
right,
and the
right.
and the eyebrows, and
I was also not only the lead singer but the non-musician in the group.
But Pat, you've got to tell everybody you have a great singing voice. Like
I don't think that's for me to say.
Listen, everybody. He has got a great singing voice. He's amazing. You should hear some of his recordings.
Amanda,
that's okay. Amanda's my daughter. I appreciate being called that.
Melinda, I was always, though, a big band singer. I was always a jazz singer. I was always doing Sinatra kind of arrangements and those kinds of things. That's what appealed to me. I liked rock and roll, but the character that I did, Hubcap, well, I created a voice for Hub, and so we were doing Little Richard things and James Brown things, and then we wrote a couple of songs that we thought would just be fun, and they became really good-sized hits, far beyond anything we ever thought. But Mike and the guys and I were having the best time of our lives because we weren't taking it very seriously, and we were all kind of involved in the comedic elements of this. And we were on the road together, and we saw one another every day. And Mike really was truly the fourth part of the show.
Was there any hint at that time that he had clinical depression?
Not for me. Duffy did recognize, and I think that he and Duffy had conversations about his clinical depression. Wallen Ladd and I never had a clue.
Well, actually, he was bipolar, so it wasn't just clinical depression. He would have manic episodes too. But the only time we actually saw him after he left the show was whenever he was in one of his stages, because whenever he was in his depressed state, he wouldn't call out to anybody. He would possibly call me at the early stages of it. I could tell what things were going on, and I would ask, "Are you on your medications?" So,
and if ever you would hear the cliche about the last person in the world that you would ever expect to harm himself, it was Mike Condello. And Mike and I were together far more than I was with the rest of the guys in the band. But Mike was, as I said, this delightful, whimsical, creative force. And I never heard anything negative from Mike. Mike would always find some positive thing to say about people, about everything, with the possible exception of Neil Diamond.
Or Barry Manilow was another one. Although he gave them credit for being able to write. Michael had this thing about success. If you became too popular, then something was wrong. Unless you were the Beatles.
Except for the Beatles.
Yeah.
And Melinda, one of the thrills of my life. And I really hope, even though you said I wasn't allowed to take over the show,
and you're not going to be,
I really hope that I can offer the phone number at least one time, 602-875-0444. I'd love to have you call in. If you remember Mike Condello, if you remember Cap of the Wheels or any of those things, because it's kind of about him and how a creative force like Michael can have another side, a side that I never saw. And
but it's more than that, because whatever Michael's side was, Michael ended up committing suicide.
Yes.
Now we're talking about grief here.
Yeah.
And so
that was a shock to you.
Shock?
You were shocked by Michael's suicide.
Let me tell you the circumstances then.
Yeah.
Please do.
Okay, because of itself, it was kind of dramatic. Michael had moved to Los Angeles to be in the recording industry and also to be a casting, a part of the casting company that cast commercials. Wasn't really a casting director, but he was an employee of a casting company.
And he had been over to see us about 3 weeks before, because we were out of the country, and he was supposed to be coming over right after we got back. So.
After we got back from Moscow, Duffy and I and a production crew from KTAR went to Moscow to do my radio show, my daily talk show, from Pushkin Square. We picked the location because it was the location of the, at that time, one and only McDonald's restaurant, and we had been hearing about people dressing up and making an occasion out of going to McDonald's in Moscow. And so we said, well, wait a minute, if ever we're going to get people who are open to conversing about life in Moscow, and also people who might have a command of English, we would go there and do our show outside. And so we were upstairs in the manager's office before going on, and Duffy was talking to the board operator at KTA to make sure the signal was coming through clearly and that we were okay.
I would produce your show out of town. So
yes.
I was on the phone with KTR in Phoenix.
And so he told you.
He asked me, he says, we have an emergency call for you from Babs, which was Mike's girlfriend. And
about to be his wife.
About to be his wife. They're getting married. So anyhow, I said, okay, can you patch me through? Because at that time, this is in 95, I think it was, we didn't have cell phones, especially Continental.
So we knew it had to be serious.
Yeah, for Babs to call it. So call Babs, and she gives me the message that she had found Mike and he had committed suicide and he was gone, and she didn't know what else to do, but she had to call and let us know. So she did, and she knew where we were. We were going to be coming back the next day. So I'm sitting there thinking, Pat's going to be on the air in about 45 minutes. How do I tell my husband that one of his closest friends has committed suicide before he goes on the air?
And so you chose to do what, Duff?
I chose to tell him.
And it was right. It was right to do.
Because he knew I was upset. So and he knew that I got the phone call. He knew, he heard aspects of it. So to being really shaken up.
To be fair to him and to you, you told him.
Well, yeah, I had to, because he noticed that I was not myself.
I thought it might be an automobile accident because his fiancée would not have asked to call before going on the air. And as Duffy is recreating that moment. I'm feeling a recreation of the depth of that right now.
The emotion
Emotion.
welled up in you. I watched you as the emotion welled up in you. Is it something that you've grieved yet, Pat, or do you just put it somewhere? I mean, you had to have put it somewhere that day in order to go on. You know, all of us that are dealing with people in front of the camera and whatever, we have to put that aside in our lives and go on no matter what, right?
I did it with Ladmo's dad. Ladmo's, I found at 5:30 in the morning, 9 o'clock I was on the air, and we were doing a tribute to Lad. The general manager of AZTV, where I do a show now, was killed in an automobile accident, something like a couple of hours before we went on. And the feelings were definitely there, but as corny as it sounds, yeah, the show must go on, and there's an awful lot of people out there who may not care a great deal. They've got their own lives to live. With Mike, I think
they're both numb.
Yes, I was angry first.
Yeah.
I was angry
at Mike.
Yeah. I was angry at Mike. I was angry at the lack of reality. It was one of those things that couldn't possibly have been, because it was difficult for me to conceive that it was Mike. But I have to tell you, as Duffy knows, Melinda, the act of suicide is inconceivable to me. Not because I'm judging that person, but it's just I don't understand how someone can be that lost.
In that state of despair. And interestingly, Pat, when I am talking to the other side, and this is not an opportunity to ask me a question, but when I am talking to the other side, suicide survivors on the other side always tell me that they felt that their loved ones would be better off without them. And I know that that is hard for people who left here to conceptualize, but that is what they say, because they feel like they have their loved ones on a perpetual merry-go-round of fear and, you know, all of those things. Obviously, Mike must have done a very good job of covering up the dark energy that comes with bipolar disorder, because with bipolar disorder you can have many different types of cycling. There can be somebody that rapid cycles, which means that they, you know, mood swing quickly, or you could have somebody that's a slow cycler that has a depression once every 3 years. You can have somebody with mixed mania, meaning that they're depressed even when they're manic. There's a lot of different aspects to it. So Mike obviously was great at covering up whatever it was that felt so dark to him.
Point we didn't know it. I mean, I knew he had depression. I didn't know if he was bipolar. Babs was the one that finally told me that he was bipolar, and his counselor had been out of town. He could not get in touch with him.
And he also had no interest in firearms at all.
Yeah.
I mean, he was not a hunter. He wasn't interested in them. He didn't find them attractive. And yet somehow he got a hold of one.
And that's what he chose to do.
Yeah. But you asked a good question. When did you grieve? Because even I don't remember you even really crying at the memorial.
We did a memorial service at the State Fairgrounds.
Right.
On the Wallace and Ladmo stage. And I read the lyrics to a Beatles song. It was a favorite of his in my life. And when I hear it now, I love the song. I admire the creativity that went into the conceptual writing of the song. But I guess maybe that Mike and his death, above all of the people that I've lost, is still unresolved.
Mm-hmm.
I still cannot even imagine that I could come up with a reason why. And I know that he was having tough times professionally.
Mm-hmm.
He was not the studio guitarist that people called, because there were hundreds of people that were on the studio list of the people that you call. And he wasn't he wasn't destitute.
No, he was working.
Yeah.
But he's working a job that he really didn't like either. There's a lot of aspects of what he was doing. And being in California that he found to be, I don't know, so antithetical to his character that it hurt him.
And you have to understand also that Mike was not just a musician. Mike was a guy who also was a contributor to the comedy on the show. Very funny guy,
Mm-hmm.
and had a wry sense of humor. And so he was truly one of us. And yet, when I lost the other two of us, it wasn't the same. And I've asked myself why. And I think with the loss of Lad and Wild in that order, it was probably because they both just had such terrifically full lives. And they were older men.
Mm-hmm.
And
how old was Mike?
At the time, he had to have been early 40s.
yes.
So he was a true friend to
Oh,
you.
yeah.
Oh,
And I think sometimes people in your position have to sort out what's truly friendship and what's people just wanting to be close to you because you're in your position.
mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that you cope with when you're in the limelight, when you're in the public eye, and the difference between true friendship and you'd be friends whether you were in business
Sure.
together or not. And he was one of those people that you really cared about at a core level.
And I don't ever want that to sound as if the people who, if I may use the term, fans of the things we did on the Wallace Show, or any of the things that we were involved in, that we were lucky enough to be involved in one single market,
Mm-hmm.
where people would grow up with you
Mm-hmm.
and their kids would grow up with you.
Right.
Those people, those are special people
Of course.
in our lives, but
But they're not part of our immediate family.
no,
They're
and
not
and
that
Mike was
depth of
family.
that connection.
Mike was as close to a brother as I
as you
ever
got.
had.
Yeah.
And Mike was also an only child.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So your brother liked to each other.
mhm.
So I guess my question to you would be, have you forgiven him yet? I want to say to everybody, forgiveness is a very interesting word because we certainly don't forget. You can see that Pat hasn't forgotten the raw feelings of the loss and the emotion of how he felt about Mike. But forgiveness means that Pat has somehow come to recognize that what Mike did at a soul level was Mike's karmic profile, and Pat has had to accept that and neutralize that and honor him for what he did and move forward in his life in a different way.
I don't even know if it's a matter, though. Now that I think of it, of forgiveness, I was angry at the moment. In fact, I remember.
You calling him a name?
I'm not a violent person,
Mm-hmm.
but I punched the wall.
Did you?
Well, you also called him a son of a bitch, but that's beside the point.
Isn't that funny? I don't remember that. But I could not believe. I didn't think about him taking himself away from his son Mikey, or his wife, or his grandchildren. I selfishly, now that I think of it, was angry that he took himself away from me. But isn't it interesting that as a guy who has logged a few thousand hours on camera, that I still have this. I can talk about virtually anything. I can talk about disasters that have taken place somewhere in the world, and really sad stories. But it still gets to me when we're talking about Michael.
And by the way, part of grief for men is grieving for friends, because that's very, very difficult, and they don't always know how to be able, or who to talk to, or how to talk to about losing a best friend. And if you've ever lost a best friend, call 602-875-0444. And we go back to talking about loss of people that are in your life, in business or partnership. And you also lost, or I should say we also lost, because she's a dear friend, another partner not too long ago, Lisa.
Oh.
And I actually knew Lisa myself. I remember the first time ever being on your show, Pat. And I was sitting out waiting to go in, and Lisa came out. Oh my gosh, you guys, Lisa, such a pretty girl, such a pretty spirit inside or outside. And she sat down with me, and I said, who is, and I can't remember the name I gave her, but it was her husband's name. And she was like, oh, she couldn't believe that I had gotten her husband's name, and she was so excited about it.
Yes.
And she was such a delight on your
sweetheart.
show.
And she had triplets that were at that time in 8th grade. And was just one of these people that loved life so much that wanted to be involved in everything. She was involved in all of her kids' stuff, in church, doing things all for AZTV.
She started out with breast cancer.
And she started out with breast cancer.
When you do something that is as fleeting, and I think for the vast majority of people, as lacking in permanent substance as a television talk show, no matter what information you offer people, hopefully some of it is valuable. But Monday through Friday, you are not thought of as the leaders of mankind, and I certainly would
well, not
accept
today.
That. But when Lisa joined the show, she brought a level of energy and enthusiasm and hard work, really did her homework. And so we could have any guest on, no matter what, and we knew that whether it was my guest or Lisa's guest, it was going to be fine. It was going to be handled professionally. And she was fun, and the mom of triplets.
Just a spitfire.
And 4th of July and Christmas, going out to the resort with the fireworks and going to see Santa Claus at Christmas time, was involved in all of those things. And it was involved very actively in our television family lives. But
to the point, when she was diagnosed with breast cancer, she went through that pretty much on television to let people know what was going on.
Yes.
From the time she had her mastectomies to the reconstructions to the chemo to everything, she really let people know what was going on. That breast cancer became a very big cause for her, and she did an awful lot to. I mean, she literally losing her hair whenever she had to get her first wig. she did her first wig on the show.
And this is really not an intrusion into family privacy, but her daughter, the only girl of the triplets, had a form of alopecia and had no hair forever, and it was fine with her. She went to school. She wasn't just the bald girl in class. She was that funny girl who also got good grades. She was terrific. But one day, darned if Lisa didn't have her daughter on the show as a special guest. And she might have been in 5th or 6th grade at the time. And here's this little girl, fine, being on television with her bald head. And Lisa, beautiful, blonde television personality, saying, we have a lot in common. Took her wig off. Now, as a woman, hair, crowning glory.
Yes.
And there she was, and the two of them finished the interview together. She was that courageous, and she was that willing to be herself. And so when we found out then that the breast cancer had returned.
We found out that it wasn't the breast cancer that returned, it was the cancer, that somehow it had metastasized to her liver. So all of a sudden we find out we've gone through you had gone through on a daily basis with her, this whole thing of having breast cancer, then being cleared of cancer, and then within about 8 to 10 months, the cancer had shown up again, but this time in the liver.
She was a tremendous standard bearer for women in particular who either have already faced the reality of that or were concerned because of family history that she was terrific. And we did a thing together out in Scottsdale, and very soon after that,
I think the next day, she ended up being in the hospital the rest of her life.
And so, Pat, you're more or less the patriarch of that television show. You're the mainstay there. You're the one. How did you lead your staff and the people at work through the grief and the loss of Lisa? Or did you?
Good question.
I don't know that I would ever think of it in terms of leadership. I was there from the beginning of the talk show 15 years ago when they first started doing talk shows from Phoenix, and so
the staff looks up to you. I've been there, so I know that all the staff looks up to you. I know I'm not just guessing. I watched. I see. They respect you and they look up to you. So I guess, Duffy and I did a segment on the 4 agreements and said we never should assume, but I would assume that responsibility for you was an additional, heavy burden in the loss.
I think as much as anything, you don't keep it quiet. I think you remind people how terrific she was, and the laughs and the good times. And occasionally you also play a videotape.
Yeah. In a way, what Pat does, I think, may help the grieving process because of the day after almost everything, he's on talking about it with people for hours. So the day after Lisa passed, we find out she passed, the next morning, they look up to him because Pat is the one that's going on the air telling people and trying to maintain a professionality in regard to what he's doing, of saying, we just lost one of our family.
You're telling the television audience.
Yeah, but I'm also saying this isn't just about Lisa, because you're a part of the family. You're here every day watching what we offer, and we hope that you like most of it. But let's talk about you. Let's talk about you and maybe the losses that you've already experienced. I haven't had this kind of terminal experience in my life from a disease. Uh, and so, what can we learn? Who can we bring in from Barrow, from St. Joe's, from Mayo's? Who can we bring in to give you information that you might not otherwise feel comfortable asking your family doctor? And that's one of the values of being able to be in the communications business.
I think that's a great lesson for everybody, whether you're mourning somebody privately or whether you're mourning somebody publicly. I think the communication we've heard from all the men prior to tonight was talking about it helps. Every single, both fathers said that they talked to their spouses about it. Both fathers said that they keep a sense of humor about it. Bart said he talks about his wife constantly, that he keeps a sense of humor about it. So by doing that on a television show, it gives people permission to be able to talk about it, to laugh about it, to work it through in that regard.
I asked Mike Cipriano, Lisa's husband, a few weeks ago. I just called him. How's it going? And he knew that I wasn't just talking about how are you doing with the loss of Lisa, but how's it going with the kids? I mean, now you've got 3 kids in high school. And I said, how's it going, Mike? And he said, well, I guess it's no surprise. We still miss Lisa. Kids still miss their mom. But the kids are so busy. They're so involved in so many different things. And much of that was Lisa's doing,
She
too.
established that routine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So her legacy lives on. Do you hear from Mike or Lisa? Do you get clairvoyant, clairaudient thoughts? Do you feel or hear anything?
No, you say everyone has that gift. And I haven't really had that experience. Maybe tonight. I'd like to hear that Lisa has discovered a place for that energy. Because boy, if anything describes her, it's that tremendous energy. She wasn't all over the place. She was able to channel it.
She was a firecracker. A firecracker isn't all over the place. It just
right there and
firecracks.
just love it.
But I haven't had that many partners. I've had Wall and Ladd, and I've had Lisa on the air, and now I have 475 examples of why estrogen works on a talk show.
You've got a gaggle of geese, huh?
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful ladies on your show.
And they're smart. They're terrific. But listen, Lisa and I had a special kind of relationship on and off the air.
Yes.
She was also a friend of
Also
ours.
a good friend, yeah.
Good girl. So,
But we're talking about. So you have dealt with grief in your own way by talking it out on the air mainly. Do you ever, once you have talked it out on the air, do you ever go back and go inside yourself and say what is going on, or do you? This is now it. It's all now talked about. There's nothing else to think. Do you ever just say, all right, I need to get something out?
About Lisa, about Mike, about anybody.
About anybody. Mom and dad, my mom and dad.
No, we haven't talked about my mom and dad.
No, yours, not mine.
Okay, but my parents and I had an unusually close relationship, not only as our only child, but because of the fact that I was on the road with them, and it was almost 7 days a week, 24 hours a day,
right?
Because I was also homeschooled by my mom. And so it was, by its very nature, on the road, a gypsy family, traveling from coast to coast. But as I think of them, my dad passing first, and then several years later, my mom, I just always think they had terrific lives. They just, there wasn't anything that I could say, oh, if only they had gotten to go to Hawaii, because they got to go everywhere.
So are you saying that when we grieve, that when we're grieving someone that we see had a life that we feel was fulfilling or accomplished or, you know, full of love, light, and laughter, that the grief process is different?
For you.
Yes. And that's why with Wall and Lad, every day, virtually every day, including weekends, for 30 years, and sometime after that too. It's just when I was on the show. But here are two guys who had incredible experiences of fulfillment. The laughter and the constant reminder that they and what they did, what we all did together, meant a great deal to a lot of people on every walk of life. And so it's hard for me to even think about grieving for them, because they just, they had so much while they were here, as far as I'm concerned.
This is just a little different process for you. Tell everybody a little bit about the Wallace and Ladmell Foundation, about the wonderful statue that has been made, and you know what's happening with that, because
nice.
You know, this is such a legacy. The three of you is such a legacy to everyone here in Phoenix, and the only reason that I regret not being raised here, certainly not because of the politics, but the only reason I regret not being raised here is because I missed out on that. Of course, I was raised in New York, and so
you had soupy sales.
Yeah, we had soupy sales. So tell everybody about the foundation, Pat.
Right, and of course you know that you can always make up for those lost years by watching YouTube.
Absolutely.
And all of those bits that are still there.
And many times there are shows on the KZTV and on some of the other shows. What am I saying? Channel 8. What am I trying to say?
Yes, PBS.
PBS. Thank you, Duffy. Those shows that I have sat and watched, and including having Elliot watch one or two, because Elliot calls Mr. McMahon his papa. And one day, Elliot, I'll just tell you guys this, that he said to me one day, you know, there's a picture of my papa in my grade school. And I said, is there now? And he said, yes, Grandma, I want you to know that no one knows you at all, but everyone knows my papa.
Well, wait till you bring Elliot downtown to a park downtown near the Cronkite School, when sometime, probably between fall and winter, will be the installation of that which neither Wall nor Lad nor I could ever have dreamed. Because when three guys are perfectly happy getting laughs by kids and their parents, you don't think in terms of permanently being remembered with a bronze sculpture. But Neil Logan, magnificent Arizona sculptor, was commissioned to do a sculpture of Wall and Lad and Gerald. Gerald being probably much closer to your personality. But
That's a subtle way of calling me a brat, everybody.
The same hair.
Same hair, yeah. Same hair.
And Gerald was one of the characters that I did, and was a little Lord Fauntleroy brat. But so the three characters, and that will be installed downtown in a park. And
but there's a Wallace and Ladmell Foundation Facebook page. All kinds of things that you can find out about it.
Yes.
And so if you would like to even contribute to the Wallace and Ladmell,
because it actually benefits the arts for children here in Arizona, which is, you know, something that we are losing for our youngsters because of budget cuts and everything that's going on. So it's so much more than that. So please look it up and look up on the Wallace and Ladmo Facebook page, and absolutely donate if you can. And I think we have a caller in, Bill.
Jane.
Bill's gonna transfer Jane to talk to Mr. McMahon. I don't think Jane was raised here, Pat. I'm not sure. I don't think Jane was raised here. So let's just see. Hi, Jane.
Good evening, Melinda and Duffy and Pat. How are you?
Good, honey. How are you? Were you raised in Arizona? I can't remember.
Excuse me?
Were you raised in Arizona? I cannot remember.
Oh, no. I'm a California girl.
A California.
But I've been everywhere.
Yeah. Well, do you have a question for Pat McMahon tonight?
You know, I didn't have a question, but I just really, such a light bulb went off a few minutes ago when you just kind of made the comment, when you feel, you know, from your perspective, that the person that's had a full life, how the grieving takes on a different kind of meaning. And thought of that like before, but it was like, oh my gosh, because that's exactly, that is, for me, I felt like that's exactly why my grieving, I felt, was different when, you know, a 45-year-old friend died as opposed to, you know, a parent of 88 years, even though one's a parent.
True, but what I want you to think about, Jane, is when we talk about something like that, let's take someone like Ryan White.
Yes.
Now, did Ryan White live a full and fruitful life? You bet your ass he did. Yeah. Because look at what he did for HIV/AIDS. Yeah. And so we have to look at it not from age necessarily, but from a different perspective on the results of someone's karmic profile. When, you know, they were here, what did they accomplish? Because goodness gracious, there are young people that leave the planet that accomplish a great deal for others and still have lived this wonderful and full life.
How old was Ryan?
I think he was in his young teens. I'll have to check with Jason. Yeah, 13 or 14 is what I think. But have you ever thought of it that way, Jane, that it's not necessarily the years, but it's the resulting karmic profile that counts? Like, what was the soul trying to teach?
You know, did they have a good life? Did they, you know, I think I would probably grieve more for somebody that lived a long time that was terribly unhappy because of they didn't live their life to the fullest.
Ooh.
So yes.
So it's a real interesting double-edged sword when we look at all of it. You know, I think the question for Pat in regards to the difference between Lisa and Mike, because certainly Lisa Cipriano accomplished a great deal in her lifetime, even though she died at, I believe, 48 or 49 years old. And certainly, you know, just hearing from Pat the contributions that Mike made to others, he still had a full life. But I think that what Pat is saying is that because they were so accomplished in their lives at such an early age, there was so much more possibility for them, and that we mourn the possibilities in that regard. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, Jane,
I think exactly that you mourn for that.
Yeah, you mourn for the possibility, you know, of what, you know, Jane, my mom died at 84. And I didn't mourn her crossing because she had Alzheimer's. I really thought it was, you know, time for her to go. But I mourned that she lost all the possibilities of the rest of her years, what she could have gotten out of them, because the Alzheimer's robbed her of her brain. So there's different ways we have to look at all of that, you know?
Hey, Jane, thank you for calling.
70, we were just shocked.
Yeah.
And because it was all of our life, it was like we were growing up, and when she finally retires is when we get to do all of this stuff, because she was a single parent.
Yeah.
And then she retired at 69 and she was gone at 70, and we're like,
and by the way, that happens an awful lot, mainly because if you don't have something that you enjoy doing, or you have a passion for, you lose you lose a focus, you lose a purpose.
Yeah.
And when you don't have that, and by the way, your kids can't always be your purpose. I try to tell people that you need something. Your kids are great and they'll be there, but they cannot be your purpose. You need to have something besides that, or else you will have some problems. But
anyway,
Jane, again, thank you for calling.
I'm going
to ask Pat answering call.
Have a good night.
Bye, Jane.
Bye, Jane.
Bye.
Bye. I just want to, Debbie from New York, if you're listening, I got a hit on you. Everything's going to be all right. Just shift a little bit. Just shift your energy a little bit, sweetheart. It's going to be all right. You were going to ask Pat a question.
Because I'm going to take you to a different type of relationship and a different type of grief. Because there are a number of things that go on in couples' lives. Women have best friends that, yes, their husbands know them, but the interaction and the closeness is not the same. So I'm going back to when I lost one of my dearest friends in 1993 to pancreatic cancer, and spent a lot of time with her. She would have been my best friend for 20 years, and I was devastated. Now, Pat knew Marcia, loved Marcia, and so forth, but his grief is not going to be the same as mine. And one of the things that I noticed, and want to ask about, how hard is it for a man when his wife, and I put it this way, is grieving and they're not exactly sure what to do?
I think that it's difficult. Well, I can't say for men in general, but if I know that you're feeling the loss of one or both of your parents because it's the day they died, or the anniversary of their death, or something that creates a special sensitive memory for you, or Marcia, you are hurting on a secondary level. You're hurting one person away. I'm hurting because you're hurting. But the idea of necessarily understanding your grief, I don't know that it's a male-female thing, but if it's a husband who is devoted enough to his wife that if she's lost any relative or a pet or anything like that, that's something that we do share.
Well, we share it, but again, I'm going after a different thing because of, I'll go back to Marcia, and that is you trying to fix my grief. And
that's a guy thing.
That's definitely a guy thing.
That's definitely a guy thing. So whenever a female mourns and grieves is different. And when I'm grieving, I still need to go through it. And you want to fix, and most men tend to want to fix it so their wife will quit grieving, and not really listening to what's going on. How do you deal with that? What would you say to be able, without trying to fix things? Because one of our ongoing things is don't try to fix it.
Well, let's flip that around and ask you from your perspective. So, since we're talking about the difference between men and women, as a woman, what would you have needed from him that he didn't provide?
Listening as opposed to trying to give resolutions.
Okay, so the listening skill is the feminine energy, right?
Right.
And there's the to be, the to do. So the men's energy is the to do, trying to fix it. The woman's energy is the to be. So it's very hard to kind of cross those lines together without communicating them.
Yeah, but one of the things, I blame women as much because we do not know how to communicate. I told Pat at the time, don't try to fix it, just allow me to grieve. And it's not just men, it's doctors, it's everybody. After she had passed and so forth, yes, you go into a depression when you've lost somebody. You're sad. Sadness is a normal aspect of losing somebody. And I remember having strep throat or something afterwards, and going to the doctor, and he was asking, what was going on. I seemed sad. I told him about the grief and so forth. And the first thing he wanted to do was put me on antidepressants. And I said, let me grieve. And so grief is something that we don't teach, and we don't let people really know how to grieve.
Grief is also something that we do alone.
We do and we don't. And it's cultural, too.
It is cultural, but we do internally. It's part of our internal lives. You know, I lost one of my best friends from adrenal cancer.
Mm.
And the best thing that ever happened to me was my assistant, Izzy.
Mm-hmm.
As a man, what he did was he said to me, "Can I drive you up to hospice?"
Mm-hmm.
And he'd wait for me and he'd drive me back.
Yeah.
And he did that. And then the subsequent days, "Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to talk about it?" he said to me.
Yeah.
He really held space well.
Yeah.
I don't know how that kid learned how to do it, but it was what I needed. So I guess, you know, there's a lesson in, you know, all of that. So listen, we are getting so that we're running out of time. And I not only want to thank Pat, but I want to tell everybody about something exciting that's happening next week. Equally as exciting as having Mr. McMahon on our show, we are having an FBI profiler coming on our show next week, who's gotten permission from the FBI to be here because, you know, he's going to be on camera and everything. And he and I are going to be talking about the difference between karmic profiling and FBI profiling, and Duffy is sharpening her pencil to ask the most pointed questions she can to both of us, so that we can have these comparisons between the two. And I think that's going to be just an absolutely fascinating show. So
are we going to talk about who we're going to be profiling yet?
Well, I think we're going to take an old case.
Okay, good.
And it has something to do with an old what people think is a nursery rhyme, but it's not. And it's Lizzie Borden took her axe
and gave her mother
40 whacks
when she was
when
she
saw that she had done. She gave her father 41. Okay. Well, there's enough of that. So, Pat.
Because your father was trying to fix it.
Pat, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you sharing both Michael and Lisa. We didn't talk much about Wallace and Ladmo. You know, we went to a roast for you a couple of months ago, which was really, really wonderful fun. And everybody made a lot of fun about the years of experience that you've had in show business. And truly, you and Wallace and Ladmo go way, way back. And I know they're forever in your karmic energy field, you know.
They're getting laughs wherever they are.
And, you know, I couldn't help but think real quickly, and I know we only have 2 minutes, but I couldn't help but liken Mike to Robin Williams.
Good analogy.
When you guys were talking, I never met Mike, but when you guys were talking, I likened it to Robin Williams, that affable guy that everybody thinks is the life of the party and all kinds of fun and out there in front of the camera. And, you know, certainly we had heard that he might have a few addictive issues or this, that, but never was the expectation that at 62 years old he would take his own life.
47.
No, Robin was in his 60s.
Okay.
And so, you know, I likened for some reason Mike to that. So I guess, you know, there is a special place in heaven for the show business people. And I think that God certainly enjoys having them up there to be their entertainment. So, but we all enjoy having you here in Arizona, and I didn't even have one bit of a chance to talk to you about the God Show, which has been something that, you know, we've got to have you back on because I want to talk to you about the different people that you've talked about with religion and the God Show, and I've, you know, been privileged to be a guest on that show, and now, you know, I'm happy to have you. And
it'll be the same fee for that appearance.
And by the way, you can always get in touch with Melinda at her office at 480-755-0222. If you want to get in touch with me about anything in regard to regression hypnotherapy, I'm at 602-910-0215.
Even though we're in the same location.
And if you'd like to watch me in the morning, 9 o'clock, I mean, as long as we're plugging.
Okay, let's plug.
It's the Arizona Daily Mix on Channel 7.
Well, good night, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Look forward to seeing you next week.
See you next week.